Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. 4 months ago, I was just another guy living in the suburbs of Connecticut, working from home as a systems analyst for a mid-sized insurance company. I was the typical neighbor who waters the lawn on weekends and waves at others without really knowing who they are. I lived in one of those neighborhoods where every third house has the same design, just mirrored. My wife Jennifer and I had moved there 2 years earlier, when she became pregnant with our daughter, Lily. It was supposed to be the ideal place to raise a family. Quiet streets, good schools, and almost no crime. The most exciting thing that used to happen was when someone's recycling bin ended up rolling down the street during a storm. But all of that changed the day I decided to befriend Walter Brennan, the strange old man who lived in the colonial-style house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Walter had been there since before the residential development expanded. His home was one of the original properties from the 60s, while the rest of us had immaculate Kentucky bluegrass lawns and decorative mailboxes. His house looked like it had been frozen in time. The paint was a faded yellow that might once have been cheerful, and his garage door was marked with rust stains that looked like dried tears running down the panels. He kept very strange hours. I would see lights flickering in his basement at 3 in the morning when I got up to check on Lily. And delivery trucks would arrive at his house at unusual times. Sometimes they were from medical supply companies, other times from electronics equipment stores. And once I even saw a refrigerated truck from a laboratory instruments company. The neighbors whispered that he might be a hoarder or that he could be running some kind of illegal business. But no one had dared to speak to him directly. They said he had been living there for 15 years, since he retired from a biotechnology company in Boston. The day it all began, I was dealing with a network problem that had me on the edge of desperation. Our internet connection kept dropping every few minutes, making it impossible to work. After spending 3 hours talking to the service desk at the provider, they told me the cause could be interference coming from another nearby network. The technician mentioned something about unusually powerful signals in the area, maybe from a ham radio operator or someone using high-capacity server equipment. That's when I remembered all those electronics deliveries I constantly saw arriving at Walter's house. I thought maybe the old man had some kind of radio setup or something similar that was interfering with our signal. So I decided to do what I had avoided for 2 years, walk up to his house, introduce myself, and ask for help fixing the connection issue. It was around 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, one of those sleepy afternoons when the neighborhood feels completely deserted. Walter opened the door wearing a spotless lab coat over regular clothes, which struck me as pretty strange for someone who had been retired for more than a decade. His eyes were a pale gray, and he had that kind of stare that doesn't look at you so much as through you. His fingers were stained with something that looked like iodine, and a strange smell drifted from inside the house, a mix of disinfectant with a metallic, sweet odor, as if someone had soaked copper coins in syrup. When I explained the internet issue, his expression changed completely. He suddenly seemed very interested, almost excited, and he invited me in immediately. He said he had also had similar problems and that we could try to solve it together. That energy in his voice should have been my first warning, but I was so desperate to get back to work that I didn't think twice. The moment I crossed the threshold, I realized his house wasn't like the others. There were medical books and manuals stacked on every surface, some so old they were falling apart at the spine. Others new with titles so technical I couldn't even pronounce them. Walter led me down a narrow hallway, whose walls were covered with framed medical diplomas and certifications. There were credentials from European institutes and documents in languages I didn't recognize. The main living room didn't look like a place to live, but like a makeshift lab. There were several monitors arranged in a semicircle and cables stretching across the floor like black veins. But what really caught my attention was the basement door. It had 3 different locks, one of them with a biometric scanner. A constant mechanical hum came from behind it, like the pulse of a living machine. Walter noticed my stare and immediately steered me away, guiding me toward his computer area. He explained that he had built his own server center to carry out personal research. On the screen, he opened network diagnostic tools I knew well, and sure enough, we detected several encrypted signals coming from his location. The strength of those transmissions was incredible, far greater than anything a domestic setup should have been able to generate. As he typed, I noticed encrypted chat notifications appearing on his monitors. The usernames were unsettling: Scalpel447, Neurocut23, Bloodwork Live. Walter minimized them quickly, but I managed to catch small thumbnail images that made my stomach turn. They looked like recordings of surgeries, though something about them wasn't right. The camera angles were too calculated, the lighting too professional, as if an operating room had been turned into a film set. Walter must have noticed my discomfort, because he suddenly started talking a lot, asking me questions about my job, my family, and how long I'd been living in the neighborhood. There was something meticulous in the way he asked, as if he were collecting data about me. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, with your technical experience and my medical knowledge, we could accomplish extraordinary things together. I've been looking for someone with your profile for a long time." Before I could answer, Walter stood up and walked to a wooden cabinet full of antique medical instruments. He pulled out something that looked like an old bone saw, and as he ran a finger along the edge, he kept speaking in a calm voice. "Modern medicine," he said, "has become too limited, trapped by ethics committees and piles of regulations. But there's a whole community that understands that real progress requires flexibility." He set the saw down on the table and sat back in front of his monitors. Then, with an almost enthusiastic gesture, he added, "Let me show you something fascinating. Consider it a professional courtesy between neighbors." His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, entering passwords and passing through multiple layers of encryption. I recognized part of the process: routing through Tor, a network used to hide identity on the deep web. Finally, a sleek, dark interface appeared on the screen with an unsettling logo. A scalpel crossed with a Wi-Fi symbol. Below it, a title in white letters read, "Medstream Dark, Our Science Meets Spectacle." The site was full of video thumbnails, each showing what looked like surgical procedures in progress. But they weren't educational recordings from medical universities. The production quality was too high, the composition too artistic, with carefully calculated camera angles. Some streams had thousands of viewers connected and price tags: $500 for basic procedures, up to $10,000 for something called the Premium Experimental Series. Walter clicked on one preview, and for an instant I saw on the screen a person wearing a surgical mask and sterile gown, standing beside an unconscious patient. They spoke directly to the camera, like the host of a game show. On the side, a chat window exploded with user messages, people bidding, making requests, commenting enthusiastically. I felt a knot in my stomach. Walter watched my face closely and, without taking his eyes off the screen, explained, "It started as educational content for medical students in under-resourced countries, but the audience evolved. Now we have collectors and enthusiasts, People who appreciate the beauty of the human body. He paused before continuing. The subjects are volunteers. Of course. Well-paid volunteers. His words left me frozen. Then he added in an almost casual tone, "Your networking experience could help us expand. Better encryption, smoother streams, maybe even interactive features. Imagine the possibilities." I stood up so fast that the chair fell backward with a thud. My throat felt dry, and the sound of my own pulse roared in my ears. "I have to go," I lied. "My wife asked me to pick up Lily from daycare." It was false. On Tuesdays, Jennifer always handled that. But I needed to get out of that house as fast as possible. Walter didn't move, though I noticed a slight change in his gray gaze, a glint that made me even more nervous. He positioned himself between me and the hallway, not fully blocking me, but making his stance clear. "I understand this can be a lot to take in," he said with unsettling calm. "But you must understand that discretion is essential. We're talking about influential people, wealthy clients who value their privacy above all else. They wouldn't react well to a stranger knowing their playground." His voice was calm, almost courteous, but the message underneath was unmistakable. A threat. He slipped his hand into the pocket of his lab coat, and for a moment I felt my heart jump into my throat. But he only pulled out a business card. It wasn't a normal one. It was black metal with a single engraving. A QR code. "Think about it," he told me. "The compensation is generous. 6 figures just to start, plus bonuses depending on audience participation. But most important, think about your family. Jennifer works at that dental clinic on Maple Street, doesn't she? And your little Lily attends Sunshine Academy." He said it with a naturalness that made my blood run cold. He knew exactly where my wife worked and which daycare my daughter attended. As he walked me to the door, he kept talking about technical topics, as if he hadn't just offered me a role in a crime. He spoke about encryption protocols, servers, bandwidth. When we reached the threshold, he put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man in his 70s. "I'll give you 48 hours to think about it," he whispered. "After that, I'll need an answer. And remember, we're neighbors. We see each other every day. Our families are so close." He smiled then, showing teeth that were too white, almost artificial. "Oh, and don't worry about your internet connection," he added. "I'll adjust my signal strength. Consider it a gesture of good faith." The door closed with a soft click, followed by the unmistakable sound of all 3 locks engaging. I stumbled out of his house, my legs shaking like rubber. It felt like the air was leaking out of my chest. When I finally crossed my yard and went inside, Jennifer was in the kitchen. It only took one look from her for her to realize something was very wrong. I told her everything. The dark website, the illegal surgeries, the veiled threat against our family. Her first reaction was that we should call the police immediately, but I stopped her. "And what proof do we have?" I said. Walter was too careful. Everything I saw was on his computer, with no way to prove anything. And there was something that unsettled me even more. Those powerful people he had mentioned. What if some of them were police officers or local officials? I couldn't risk the report ending up in the wrong hands. That night we didn't sleep. We sat together on the couch, checking the locks over and over, peering through the blinds toward the yellow house at the end of the street. The lights were still on in Walter's basement, and I could make out shadows moving behind the small windows. Around midnight, 3 cars arrived. They weren't the usual neighborhood vehicles. One was a Tesla, another a Mercedes, and the third, something European, expensive, that I didn't recognize. People stepped out wearing medical masks and dark glasses, even in the middle of the night. They carried metal briefcases. They stayed there for more than 4 hours. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep quiet. I couldn't put my family at risk, but I also couldn't allow that to keep happening. I drove to the FBI office in New Haven and told them everything, from the internet problem to the Medstream dark site. At first, the agent who met with me seemed skeptical, but her attitude changed as soon as I mentioned the site's name and described the system Walter had built. She explained that they had been trying to trace that network for 2 years without success, but they had never been able to identify its physical origin. In less than 6 hours, they obtained a warrant. That same night, they carried out the raid. The FBI took part, the DEA, and even Homeland Security agents. They discovered that Walter's basement had been transformed into a complete operating room, with broadcasting equipment that rivaled a professional studio. The refrigerated trucks that arrived constantly weren't transporting simple medical instruments, but according to what they told me later, biological material. Though the agents refused to go into detail about what kind of material it was, Walter was arrested along with 2 assistants who lived in the neighboring town. In the seized records, they found millions of dollars in cryptocurrency and lists of clients spread all over the world. The investigation is still ongoing, but they assured me Walter will never return to our neighborhood, or any other. We moved 2 months later. I couldn't stand looking every day at that yellow house, with its rust stains like tears. I still have habits I can't shake. I check the locks again and again. I startle every time a delivery truck drives by. But at least my family is safe, and that dark network no longer exists. The FBI agent told me I did the right thing, that my technical knowledge was key to deciphering part of the encryption they had been trying to break for years. I try to remember that when the nightmares come back, when I close my eyes and see those shadows moving behind the basement windows again. Story 2. College was draining me dry, and I urgently needed a laptop that wouldn't wipe out what little I had left of my financial aid money. After spending hours scrolling through sites with ridiculously expensive computers, my roommate, Tyle, told me about a little-known forum he'd found through some tech channels. He said people there sold gear at prices way lower than retail, no questions asked. The link required routing through 3 different proxy servers just to access it, which should have been my first warning sign, but desperation makes you stupid. I found a listing for a pretty decent gaming laptop, priced at 1/3 of what it normally sold for. The seller only communicated through encrypted messages, demanded payment in cryptocurrency, and insisted the shipment be sent to a P.O. box I had to rent solely for that transaction. Suspicious. Yes, but I figured maybe it was just someone paranoid about taxes, or someone who didn't want to leave a trail. The laptop arrived in a beat-up cardboard box with no return address, wrapped in so much bubble wrap that it took me almost 20 minutes to get it out. At first glance, it looked new. The silver aluminum body gleamed, barely a scratch on it. The keyboard keys still had that faint texture that usually disappears after a few months of use. I powered it on. It booted up without a problem. Fresh Windows install, all drivers working perfectly. I ran every antivirus scan I knew, checked for spyware, and even did a clean reinstall of the operating system just to be safe. For the first week, it was perfect. It handled my programming assignments effortlessly, ran games smoothly, and the battery lasted longer than I expected. Until one night, while I was working on a database project, a new folder appeared on the desktop. Recovered files, the name said. The timestamp showed it had been created only 30 seconds earlier, while I was staring at the screen. Inside were dozens of video files, each one dated back as far as 3 years. The thumbnails showed blurry images, like security cameras, living rooms, bedrooms, even bathrooms. My cursor hovered over the first file, the oldest one. Part of me knew I should delete it immediately, maybe report it, but curiosity is a powerful drug. The video opened to a family having dinner, completely unaware someone was watching them. The camera angle was strange, as if it were hidden inside a smoke detector or a ventilation grill. The audio was crisp. I could hear every word as they talked about their daughter's ballet recital, the father's promotion at work, everyday conversations that made me feel filthy just for listening. The footage jumped from room to room, tracking their movements through the house, always from those hidden angles. The next video showed the same family, recorded over several months, and that's when everything got darker. Their conversations grew tense, heavy with worry. The father mentioned money problems, a debt he couldn't pay. In one video, the mother cried in the bedroom, whispering on the phone about threats they were receiving. She talked about specific amounts, $50,000, then $75,000, numbers that kept climbing. The timestamp showed the videos had been recorded only a few days apart. By the fifth video, they had suitcases in the living room, arguing about moving in with relatives, about protecting their daughter. The cameras followed them into every corner, while they packed, while they hugged, while they tried to explain to their 6-year-old why they had to abandon their home. Whoever was recording had total access to their lives, their fears, their desperation. As I kept watching those videos in disbelief, more folders started appearing on the desktop, one after another. Each had different names, bank statements, email archives, social media logs, and all of them contained information on different people. The bank statement showed regular deposits of varying amounts, $15,000 here, $23,000 there, always from different accounts and, strangely, always just below the threshold that triggers transaction reporting. In an Excel file, I found a list of names, addresses, and payment schedules. Some entries were marked in green with the word completed, others in yellow with in progress, and a few in bright red labeled defaulted, next to numbers that turned my stomach. These weren't random victims. Every folder included detailed surveillance notes, psychological profiles, families' weak points, everything carefully documented to exploit them. One file about a professor named Douglas Hart described his gambling addiction, his daughter's medical bills, and the exact pressure point that would make him give in. Another, about a business owner, contained photographic proof of an extramarital affair, enough to destroy her marriage, her reputation, and everything she'd built. I slammed the laptop shut and started pacing in circles around the room, trying to understand what the hell I'd uncovered. This wasn't just a used laptop. It was a blackmailer's operations hub. And somehow, all the material was resurfacing on my computer now. Tyler was in his night class and wouldn't be back for hours. I needed to think, to decide what to do with all that evidence. When I finally worked up the courage to open the laptop again, there was a new file on the desktop. A photo of me, taken from outside our bedroom window. In the image, I was clearly visible, pacing back and forth, wearing the same watch I'd been staring at 20 minutes earlier. The timestamp matched the exact moment I'd been panicking. My room was on the 3rd floor. Whoever took that photo had to be on the roof of the building across the street, or using a drone. I didn't want to think about the other possibilities. Next to the photo, a text file appeared. It contained only 2 lines. Now you have their files. Finish what Nathan couldn't. Nathan. So that had to be the previous owner's name. My hands were shaking as I dug through system files, searching for any trace of the old user. Despite the supposed clean format, I found fragments of old profiles, cached data, and hidden folders. Deep inside app data, I discovered a set of text files, Nathan's personal journal. The entries were dated up to just 2 months ago. At first, the text read like technical manuals, instructions for installing hidden cameras, what kind of malware to use to access computers remotely, and precise descriptions of the psychological pressure points that made different types of people break. But as the weeks went on, the tone shifted. The last entries were desperate, incoherent, full of paranoia. Nathan wrote about someone called the Architect, who ran the entire network. He never showed his face. He only communicated through encrypted channels. Nathan wanted out. He said he couldn't keep ruining lives, but his final entry was only 1 line. They know I kept copies. They're coming for me. The laptop screen suddenly flickered, and new windows began opening on their own. Chats, videos, financial logs, all active, all updated. One video showed a woman in her kitchen making dinner while her kids did homework at the table. In the corner of the video was the date from that same day. Another stream showed an elderly man in his study going through bills with trembling hands. Those recordings weren't from the past. They were live feeds. The cameras were still active, still spying, still invading the lives of innocent people. A chat pop-up appeared in the corner of the screen. Messages poured in non-stop, sent by users with names like Collector7 and Watchdog Beta. They discussed their targets, shared recordings, congratulated each other on successful extractions. They talked about the woman in the kitchen. They mentioned her husband's gambling debts, how they could exploit it, how much they could squeeze out of her retired mother. Then a message appeared that made my world stop. New asset online. Nathan's replacement is viewing the streams. Welcome to the network. Asset 1127. After that, everyone started typing at once, welcoming me, sending beginner tips, sharing links to spying and surveillance tools. Asset 1127. That was me. They'd assigned me a number. They already considered me part of the system. A user named Supervisor Delta sent me a private message with an address only 6 blocks from campus. It said my initiation package would be there at midnight. Cameras, keyloggers, everything needed for my first assignment. They'd also chosen my target, Professor Elaine Foster, from my university's economics department. Within seconds, a file appeared on the desktop with her name. It included her class schedule, address, photos of her family, and a note mentioning her son's special therapy, treatment that cost more than she earned in a month. The message was clear. Compromise her computer, install the surveillance software, find something useful, get paid. Everything was organized with sick precision. It even included a step-by-step guide, like a university assignment. I tried to shut the laptop down, but it wouldn't power off. Not even when I unplugged it or held down the power button. The battery was sealed. The machine stayed on, screen lit, videos flowing. Then more photos began appearing on the desktop. One showed Tyler, my roommate, coming back from class. Another showed my mother at her job in Oregon, and another showed my little sister leaving school. The message was silent but brutally clear. I was inside the system, and they had access to everyone I cared about. In the lower corner of the screen, A countdown timer appeared. 72 hours to complete your first assignment or face integration penalties. I remembered reading about that in Nathan's journal. The lucky ones simply lost all their money. The unlucky ones, their families received packages with fingers or woke up in empty beds where their children used to sleep. I stayed frozen, watching the numbers drop, listening as Tyler's key turned in the lock. I had no idea how to explain that. Without meaning to, I'd become part of a blackmail network that could kill both of us if I tried to escape. When he walked in, headphones on and completely unaware of my panic, I told him I felt sick, that cafeteria food had messed me up. He believed me without question. I spent the next 6 hours researching everything I could about the laptop, the network, Nathan, and his disappearance. I found a news article from 2 months earlier. It reported a body found in a river 3 towns away. Dental records confirmed it was Nathan Briggs, 24th computer science graduate. Cause of death, drowning. The coroner had noted unusual bruising patterns on wrists and ankles. His laptop had never been recovered, until now. The more I dug, the more I understood the scale of the network. I found clues linking disappearances and deaths in at least a dozen states. Young tech-savvy people vanishing along with their devices. Many cases looked similar. Lost laptops, closed accounts, and bodies found in rivers weeks later. It was a macabre pattern. But in Nathan's hidden files, I found something they hadn't planned for. The source code for his entire surveillance system. It was all there, complete, and inside it was a function he'd named insurance, an insurance policy, a kill switch designed to disable every device connected to the group's network and corrupt their servers. Nathan had built it as his last hope. He'd left detailed notes explaining how to deploy it. The timer on my screen dropped to 48 hours. I hadn't slept or eaten. I sat glued to the laptop, watching the feeds that still showed Professor Foster grading exams, her son practicing violin nearby, families living trapped by threats they didn't fully understand. I had 2 options: become their asset 1127 and use people to survive, or use Nathan's final move and pray it worked before they noticed. My phone buzzed. An anonymous message contained a photo of my sister getting into a car after school. Another message showed my mother at the grocery store. They had everything so close, so immediate. It was a show of power. If I obeyed, my loved ones would stay unharmed. If I resisted, they'd be thrown into hell. But Nathan had anticipated someone trying something like this. His switch didn't just break the network, it sent copies of all the incriminating material to authorities, to the FBI, state cybercrime divisions, and international agencies, so it couldn't be silenced. One click, and his insurance file would unleash a storm of evidence against the blackmailers. I opened the command prompt and typed the execution path Nathan had hidden in his notes. My hand trembled over the enter key. In that instant, another reminder appeared on screen. Assignment pending. 47 hours, 58 minutes remaining. The architect is watching. I pressed enter. The screen filled with lines of code. Windows opened and closed at a speed I couldn't follow. Nathan's program spread through the network voraciously, like a digital fire. The feed started freezing, pixelating, then shutting down. The chats fluttered with panic, users screaming about lost connections, corrupted files, FBI warnings popping up on their monitors. The laptop began to heat up, the fans howling, processing thousands of operations per second. Then the automated email Nathan had programmed fired off. Every victim in the database received an email with recordings of their own surveillance, instructions on how to report it, and contact details for law enforcement, who now had evidence. Professor Foster would wake up the next day knowing who had been watching her. The family from the first videos would finally know who had stolen their piece, but I also knew it wouldn't end without consequences. I destroyed years of criminal work, and their primary network had been compromised. The architect, the one running everything from the shadows, would still be free and furious. I packed some emergency cash, threw clothes into a backpack, and left the laptop on the table while it finished its self-destruction sequence. I took the least traveled route to the bus station, paid cash for a ticket, and went to the first destination available, Chicago. I tossed my phone into a dumpster behind campus and bought a burner at a roadside stop. For 3 days, I lived in cheap motels and worked cash-only jobs. I watched the news on tiny TVs. The story exploded in the media. Massive raid against a multi-state blackmail network. Dozens of arrests in the first week. Hidden equipment and cameras found in hundreds of homes. Millions recovered or traced. But reporters never mentioned the architect. The person at the top never surfaced. I stayed hidden for 2 months, constantly moving, until I finally dared to contact my family through a lawyer. I told them I was safe. The FBI contacted me and congratulated me. They called me a hero. I knew the truth. Heroes don't run. Heroes don't leave laptops behind while destruction is still running. I did what I could to save people and honor Nathan's sacrifice. Today I repair computers in a modest shop in a town you've probably never heard of. I pay for everything in cash and never stay too long in one place. And every now and then, when the night is too quiet, I still receive emails and accounts I never opened. Just one line. Always the same. The architect remembers. Story 3. It all started with a simple direct message that completely changed my life. I'm 23 years old. I graduated last spring with a degree in communications, and I'm carrying about $40,000 in student debt. Phoenix isn't exactly the modeling capital of the United States, but since high school people used to compliment my photos, clear skin, distinctive features, a face that looked good in any kind of light, I was living day to day, working at a local coffee shop, and I was desperate for extra income when a recruiter contacted me on Instagram. Her profile looked completely legitimate, a professional photo, client testimonials, and links to real modeling agencies. She called herself Vanessa Torres and said she represented emerging talent for commercial campaigns in the southwest of the country. The initial conversation was totally normal. Vanessa explained that she'd found my account through hashtags on some selfies I'd posted. She assured me I had exactly the look they wanted for an upcoming advertising campaign. Nothing glamorous, she clarified, just lifestyle photos, natural portraits. The pay was appealing, $800 for a simple session. And best of all, according to her, I didn't need to go to any studio or meet anyone in person. I only had to send high-resolution images taken by me, following certain specifications. She sent me very detailed instructions about lighting, neutral backgrounds, and specific poses. Everything seemed very professional, almost too good to be true, but I was broke, and I decided to take the risk. I spent an entire weekend setting up the shoot in my apartment. Vanessa's requirements were almost obsessive. She wanted at least 12 different angles, including straight-on portraits, three-quarter profiles, and even some photos with my eyes closed or my mouth slightly open. She said the client needed a variety of expressions and lighting types. I borrowed my roommate's DSLR camera, hung white sheets as a backdrop, and arranged desk lamps to improvise decent lighting. The process was long. I reviewed every shot, adjusted lights, checked sharpness, making sure every detail of my face was perfectly in focus. I even followed her specific requests, first without makeup, then with light makeup, and finally with full makeup. By the end of Sunday, I had more than 50 high-resolution photos showing every angle and expression of my face. 2 days later, I uploaded all the images to the secure transfer link Vanessa had sent me. The website required creating an account and verifying my identity with my driver's license, which should have been a warning sign. But she explained it was part of the standard verification process for models. Trusting her, I sent the photos along with my full name, address, and even my social security number, according to her, necessary for tax paperwork. Vanessa replied shortly after, thanking me for my professionalism and promising I'd hear about the campaign in a couple of weeks. The weeks passed, then the months. My follow-up messages went unanswered. Eventually, her Instagram account went private, and shortly after that, it disappeared completely. I assumed I'd been scammed. Just another waste of time. An expensive lesson, but with no bigger consequences. Or so I thought. 4 months later, my phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. with a fraud alert from my bank. Someone had tried to open a checking account using my name and social security number at a branch in Miami, a city I'd never even been to. When I called the fraud department that same morning, the representative explained that the person who tried it had presented an apparently legitimate driver's license with my information. But the photo, she said, looked slightly different, enough to make the teller suspicious, who decided to report it. The security camera footage showed a woman who looked like me. Same build, same face, just with a different hairstyle and clothing style. And that's when the truth hit me. It wasn't just identity theft. Someone had used my face. The real horror started when I decided to investigate on my own. I used Google's reverse image search tool to track the photos I'd sent to Vanessa, in case they were posted somewhere. What I found made my stomach turn. My face appeared on dozens of websites, some buried in search results, others hidden behind login screens. But the most disturbing thing I found was on a forum where users debated high-quality facial overlays. They shared tips on the best sources for realistic photos. One of them mentioned a specialized marketplace where you could buy full-face packages. With the help of a friend who knew how to access those kinds of pages, I managed to get in. And there it was, my face. It appeared in several different listings. The site was like a twisted version of an online store, complete with product descriptions, prices, and customer reviews. My photos were organized into different bundles. Premium Identity Kit, $200, which included my front and profile portraits. Complete Transformation Package, $500, with all the images I'd taken, categorized by expression and angle. The descriptions were chilling. They promised my face was ideal for financial applications, had perfect bone structure for deepfake generation, and was successfully verified for document authentication. And the worst part, the reviews. People rating my face, commenting on how realistic it looked, sharing tips on which angles worked best for different kinds of fraud. One said they'd rented an apartment in Dallas using my photos. Another bragged about opening 3 credit cards with my identity. The scope of the problem started to become clear. In the following weeks, the consequences of my identity theft became terrifying and very concrete. Calls and notifications started coming in that had nothing to do with me. Collection agencies demanding debts I'd never taken on, including $3,000 in medical bills from a hospital in Atlanta and overdue rent notices for apartments in at least 3 different states. A detective in Nevada called me asking about a woman they'd arrested for shoplifting who was carrying a fake ID with my name. Fortunately, the security images showed clear differences between her and me, so I wasn't charged. But the fact that someone was committing crimes using my identity left me in shock. The worst came when my boss received a call from someone claiming to be me, asking for details about my schedule and personal information. The voice didn't sound like mine, but they had enough information to convince the receptionist at first. That kind of impersonation made me realize how exposed I was. Psychologically, it was devastating. Every phone ring was a shot of anxiety. Another fraud alert, another account open in my name. I started to feel paranoid every time I went out. I imagined running into an imposter walking down the street wearing my face. Sleep became a fantasy, the sleepless hours filled with terrifying scenarios about what they might be doing with my image. I became an obsessive investigator of my own case. I checked my credit report several times a day, reviewed bank activity, set up Google alerts to detect any mention of my name in news or on the web. But the helplessness remained, because credit bureaus could only react after someone had already opened an account, and the marketplaces where my photos were being sold operated beyond the easy reach of U.S. authorities. I decided to take more forceful action, and after contacting other victims in forums and private groups, I found a cybersecurity firm specializing in digital identity theft. It wasn't cheap. They asked for $5,000 up front. But their reputation said they could trace underground markets and get images taken down. I hired the company. For 2 months, they worked full-time on my case. They located the servers hosting my photos, documented the transactions, and coordinated with the international authorities to take down the specific listings showing my face. It was meticulous work and sometimes frustrating. Many listings reappeared on mirrors or migrated to new domains. Beyond removing images, the firm helped lock down my financial life. They froze my credit with the major bureaus, activated monitoring services to alert me to any new account openings, and guided me in building a solid legal paper trail documenting the theft. They even worked with facial recognition companies to flag my biometric data as stolen, with the goal that verification systems could detect it and raise alerts. Those steps were decisive. After 6 months, the most immediate crisis had eased. They told me they had managed to remove approximately 85% of the images accessible in the marketplaces, and that the seller's original operation had been shut down. Even so, I still received occasional sporadic alerts, and the anxiety never fully disappeared. As part of rebuilding my life, I moved to another state, slightly changed my legal name, and reduced my social exposure to the bare minimum. I can't recover every photo or undo the damage completely, but I've managed to regain control of my identity. I learned to recognize the warning signs I ignored at the beginning: the requests for document verification, the insistence on sensitive data, and to distrust offers that sound too good. The harshest lesson was realizing that, in an increasingly digital world, our face functions like a permanent password. When someone steals that password, the scope of the damage can be enormous and spread with a speed and breadth that's often impossible to predict until it's too late. Story 4. October had always been my favorite month in Sacramento. Cool mornings, perfect weather for going on a run, and the maples on my street turning those bright orange shades that make everything look like a postcard. I'd been living on Maple Grove Drive for 6 years, with the same unchanging routine, the same job as an insurance adjuster, the same morning coffee, the same nights watching Netflix. At 34, I thought I had my quiet suburban life completely figured out. It was one of those neighborhoods where the biggest drama was deciding who would host the annual block party. Everyone knew each other just well enough to comment on the weather, but not much more than that. The Hendersons, my next-door neighbors, had moved to Florida in August, leaving their house empty with a for sale sign that seemed to mock the stalled real estate market. Everything in my world was predictable, comfortable, and above all, safe. Until that Tuesday morning, when I woke up and discovered that none of my devices had an internet connection. I assumed it was a minor annoyance that would be fixed before noon. Pretty soon I noticed it wasn't just my house. I stepped outside to check whether a squirrel had chewed through a cable, and I saw Mrs. Patterson across the street standing in her driveway holding her phone up in the air, as if trying to catch a signal directly from the sky. Her teenage son, Kevin, was doing the same thing from the porch, with the genuine desperation of someone cut off from his online gaming world. I called my internet provider and got the automated message every customer dreads. We are currently experiencing service interruptions in your area. Estimated restoration time is 24 to 48 hours. Perfect. I had 3 insurance claims I needed to submit before Friday, all with photos and reports that had to be uploaded to the company portal. The downtown coffee shop would have to be my office for the next few days. As I grabbed my bag and headed to the car, that's when I noticed it for the first time. The old white van parked at the end of the street. The vehicle itself didn't have anything particularly strange about it. Plenty of contractors and delivery drivers used our street as a shortcut to the main avenue. But this one had been there for several days, judging by the fast food containers piled behind the windshield and the layer of morning dew covering it. What really caught my attention were the modifications. Several thin metal antennas stuck up from the roof, and thick black cables ran around the outside of the vehicle. The rear doors had small drilled holes with more cables threaded through them, and I could have sworn I heard a constant electric hum coming from inside. The license plate was from another state, somewhere on the East Coast, though from where I stood I couldn't make out which one. A small solar panel was strapped to the roof with improvised metal brackets. The whole setup felt like mad science, like someone was running clandestine experiments. For a moment I thought about walking over for a closer look, but common sense reminded me I had work to do, and that it was probably just some electronics hobbyist traveling with a rolling project. I spent most of Tuesday and Wednesday working in different coffee shops around the city, hopping from one to another when the Wi-Fi got slow or the place got too crowded. Every time I came home, the van was still there, in the exact same position. By Thursday morning, I started paying closer attention to it during my comings and goings. The interior was clearly packed with electronics running 24 hours a day. I could even see a faint blue glow filtering through the tinted window, and the electrical hum never stopped. Most unsettling of all was that I never saw anyone enter or exit the vehicle, even though there were clear signs someone was living inside. Empty energy drink cans were piling up near the driver's seat, and more than once I caught the outline of a silhouette moving in the back, shifting through the shadows. That solar panel, which had seemed like a weird detail at first, was starting to make sense. Whoever was in there was powering some kind of serious equipment without needing to start the engine. Thursday night, the internet service finally came back. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt uneasy. The constant presence of that van had gone from curious to disturbing, especially because no one else on the street seemed to notice it, or worse, to care. Friday morning brought the first real sign that something serious was happening. I was catching up on emails and uploading the delayed claim reports when my computer started becoming unbelievably slow. Every web page took forever to load, and my company's system kept crashing with errors I'd never seen. At first, I thought it was network congestion after the outage, but I decided to run a speed test. The result was baffling. Download speeds were normal, but uploads were maxed out, as if my connection were sending massive amounts of data without me doing anything. I opened my router's network monitor and found dozens of active connections to unknown IP addresses, all uploading at full capacity. My home network was behaving like it was hosting a server farm, not like an ordinary guy checking email and uploading claim photos. The coincidence was too big to ignore. The mysterious van had shown up right before the internet went down, and my network started behaving strangely the moment service returned. That weekend, I became obsessed. I installed traffic monitoring software and started logging every spike of suspicious activity. The data was being sent constantly, but the volume surged between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. when the whole neighborhood was asleep. The destination addresses traced back to servers in countries I'd never even heard of, and the amount of information leaving my connection was absurd. More than 50 gigabytes per night. My monthly data usage tripled, without me changing my habits. The van was still there. I started walking the dog during those peak hours, hoping to see some sign of activity. One of those nights, I noticed the blue glow inside the vehicle pulsing rhythmically, almost like it was breathing, and the electrical hum had turned into a more complex pattern of beeps and tones. There was no doubt. Whatever was happening inside that vehicle was directly connected to my home network. The question was how, and above all, what kind of data they were transmitting through my connection without my knowledge. Monday morning brought the answer. I was getting ready to leave for work when the doorbell rang at 7:30, an unusual time for visitors. Through the peephole, I saw two people in dark suits, holding badges and folders. My first thought was that they were bringing some tragic news, but the reality was much more unsettling. "Good morning, sir. I'm Special Agent Rebecca Knox with the FBI, and this is Agent James Turner," the woman said in a firm tone. "We're conducting a cybersecurity investigation in this neighborhood, and we need to ask you a few questions about your internet connection." Both of them kept glancing toward the end of the street, where the white van was still parked. Turner checked his tablet and began questioning me with surgical precision. Had I noticed unusual activity on my network in the last few days? Any unknown device connected to my Wi-Fi? Changes in internet speed or behavior? The way they phrased the questions made it clear they already knew something. They weren't looking for information. They were confirming what their own investigation had already uncovered. What they told me next made my stomach twist. Agent Knox explained that my IP address had been flagged by federal monitoring systems for uploading encrypted files to servers linked to international cybercrime networks. The transferred data included classified documents stolen from government databases, financial information from compromised banks, and, in her words, materials relevant to national security investigations. They showed me printed copies of network logs with my address and internet account highlighted in yellow, alongside timestamps that matched exactly the moments I'd recorded the suspicious activity. Agent Turner asked whether I had any knowledge of cryptocurrency mining, illegal file-sharing networks, or whether I knew any foreigners with access to sensitive information. The situation was so absurd I could barely process it. Me, an insurance adjuster who could barely set up a Wi-Fi printer, being questioned by the FBI about digital espionage crimes. When I mentioned the van and my suspicions about interference on my network, the agents exchanged a brief look, an expression that made it clear I'd just confirmed something important. Knox asked me to tell them everything I'd noticed, the sounds, the lights, the hours of activity. As I spoke, Turner took frantic notes, building a timeline from the details I provided. When I finished, Knox explained what they had uncovered in their investigation. The vehicle belonged to Anthony Carlisle, a 38-year-old software engineer who had lost his job at a major tech company 8 months earlier. Using high-powered antennas and signal amplifiers, Carlisle infiltrated insecure Wi-Fi connections, especially ones with default passwords, and used them as a channel to route illegal traffic. His setup was so advanced he could operate across multiple networks at once, routing his activities through different IP addresses so it looked like the homeowners themselves were uploading the compromised files. Turner showed me photos from other cities where Carlisle had operated, always quiet areas, with similar houses, where a parked van didn't raise suspicion. The interior was packed with servers, portable coolers, cables, and solar batteries. Everything needed to run complex operations for weeks without relying on external power. The FBI had been tracking him across 4 states, following a chain of compromised home networks that had enabled cyber attacks and caused millions in losses. Knox explained that Carlisle didn't just use victims' connections to cover his tracks. He sold access to those networks on the dark web, offering clean IP addresses to other criminals who needed anonymity for their activities. My network had been used to upload everything from stolen credit card databases to classified military documents. The encryption software he used was military-grade, making it nearly impossible for automated systems to detect the true content of the transfers. Only by manually analyzing patterns and destinations were they able to connect the transmissions to illegal activity. Turner added that they had spent months monitoring international servers, watching terabytes of sensitive information flow through residential networks across the country. What made Carlisle especially dangerous was his ability to camouflage his operations inside normal-looking household traffic patterns. If it hadn't been for the internet outage that forced me to check my network, I never would have noticed anything. Not until the FBI knocked on my door. The arrest happened that same afternoon, and it was very different from what you imagine from television. Around 3, I watched from my window as several unmarked vehicles silently surrounded the van from different angles. There were no shouts or guns drawn, just a precise maneuver that blocked every escape route. Agent Knox had asked me to stay inside, but I couldn't help watching. The rear doors opened from the inside, and a thin man with messy hair and several days of stubble stepped out with his hands raised. He looked exactly like a disgraced genius, wrinkled clothes, tired eyes, and the resigned expression of someone who knows his luck has run out. The inside of the vehicle was a technological wonder compressed into a few square meters. Laptops, stacked servers, fans, cables tangled everywhere. Agents spent hours cataloging and removing every piece of equipment, filling several vehicles with confiscated hardware. Within 48 hours, my connection returned to normal, and I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Agent Knox called to confirm my network had been cleaned and secured, and that I wouldn't face charges. I was a victim, not an accomplice. The investigation revealed that Carlisle had compromised more than 200 residential networks across multiple states, facilitating crimes that had cost companies and government agencies millions in losses. His mobile system was so efficient he could set up in a new neighborhood within hours and disappear just as quickly if he felt he was being tracked. 3 months later, Anthony Carlisle pleaded guilty to computer fraud, identity theft, and trafficking stolen data. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Sometimes I think about how close I came to being falsely accused of federal crimes. It all began with a simple internet outage and ended with a criminal operation exposed right in front of my house. Today I keep my router protected with impossible passwords, 24/7 active monitoring, and a new awareness of the invisible risks of modern life. Because now I know that sometimes the biggest threats come from the most unexpected places. Story 5. I was 28 years old, working 2 part-time jobs, and barely managing to survive after my divorce. That was my reality in March 2022. Single motherhood in Pennsylvania wasn't what I had imagined when I was younger, but I did everything I could to keep going for my 6-year-old daughter, Chloe. Working at a department store barely paid me minimum wage, and on weekends I cleaned offices to keep the lights on, though just barely. Every night, after putting Chloe to bed, I'd sit in front of my phone with a plate of reheated mac and cheese and scroll through job boards and Facebook groups, desperately searching for something better. One of those groups, Single Moms Supporting Each Other, Pittsburgh area, had become my lifeline. There I found temp gigs, sold things I no longer needed, and most importantly, got advice from other women in situations similar to mine. That Tuesday night, while Chloe slept and the TV filled the apartment's silence, I saw a post that seemed too good to be true. It was from a woman named Amanda Clark, and the ad stood out from the rest because it looked professional. No garage sales or neighborhood babysitting requests. She was looking for premium nannies for families who, she said, valued discretion and were willing to pay well for it. The starting pay was $25 an hour, more than double what I made at the store. The families required live-in nannies for short-term assignments, 2 to 4 weeks, with everything covered. Amanda claimed these were high-profile families who demanded background checks and special training, but that the compensation matched the level of service expected. She also made it clear that positions were limited and only offered to pre-screened candidates who demonstrated exceptional reliability and ethics. The post had been up for barely an hour and already had dozens of comments from desperate moms like me, all asking how to apply. Something about the way Amanda responded, professional, friendly, but always vague on details, made me hesitate for a moment before leaving my own comment. Less than 20 minutes later, I received a private message from her. She thanked me for my interest and said my profile showed exactly the kind of dedication they were looking for. She attached a link to a preliminary questionnaire to evaluate whether I was suitable for her exclusive network of trusted caregivers. At first, the questions seemed normal: previous experience, availability, references, but little by little, they became more personal. They wanted to know my financial situation, whether I had reliable transportation, whether I lived alone, and even whether I stayed in contact with my family or had a support network. One question felt strange. Would you feel comfortable working in confidential environments where discretion about family dynamics is essential? Another asked if I would have any issues traveling on short notice or staying in places without reliable cell service. I tried to convince myself these were normal procedures for wealthy families who valued their privacy. The next morning, while helping Chloe get dressed for school, Amanda called me directly. Her voice had that overly cheerful tone of telemarketers. She congratulated me on passing the first evaluation and said they wanted to move forward with a video interview that same afternoon. When I mentioned I needed to arrange childcare for my daughter, she responded quickly, "We can do it after 8, when the little ones are already asleep." During the call, she kept referring to her organization as a family placement network, and she assured me that accepted candidates would have access to a private portal where they could view available openings. She also mentioned training modules that explained specific family protocols and behavior expectations. She said that last phrase, behavior expectations, with an emphasis that made my skin crawl. Still, I pushed my doubts aside. I needed the job. The video interview took place that same night through an app I had never heard of, Secure Link. Amanda explained it was a platform required for client confidentiality reasons. When the call started, She appeared on screen from what looked like a generic office. Beige walls, motivational posters, and lighting that was far too cold. She wore an impeccable blazer, so formal it felt out of place for an interview at 8 at night. Her questions were strange. They weren't focused on childcare skills or first aid, but on my willingness to adapt to unique family situations. She wanted to know if I had any moral or religious objections to alternative family structures, and whether I would be comfortable signing strict confidentiality agreements. When I asked for more details about what exactly those alternative structures meant, she just laughed. "Every family is different," she replied in an almost rehearsed tone. "But discretion is the most important quality we look for." Toward the end of the interview, she mentioned that selected candidates would receive a welcome package with credentials and access codes to the portal, but warned that sharing that information with anyone else could result in immediate legal action. The call lasted exactly 30 minutes. Amanda ended the conversation promising to contact me within 48 hours with the next steps, and she kept her word. 2 days later, I received her email with the subject line, "Welcome to our premium placement program." It said I had officially been accepted and would receive access to their exclusive portal within the next hour. The email included a link that didn't look like any normal web address. A random combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, followed by a strange extension I didn't recognize. The instructions were precise. I had to download a browser called Tor and use only that browser to access the link. I must never open it in my usual browser, and I must not connect through public Wi-Fi networks. "These are security measures," Amanda insisted, "to protect both the families and our caregivers." The message also included a username and a temporary password, along with a warning. "You have 24 hours to log in and complete your profile. If you do not, your access will be permanently revoked." Looking back, I can see every red flag waving in my face, but at the time, desperation made me ignore them. That Friday night, after Chloe was asleep, I turned on the computer, downloaded the Tor browser, and followed the instructions step by step. The login process was slow, requiring multiple layers of verification. Security questions based on the information I had provided in the earlier questionnaire. When the page finally loaded, I took my breath away. It looked legitimate. Elegant design, formal logos, a clean dashboard with clear sections, available offers, training, member directory, compliance guides. The header read, "Welcome to the Elite Family Care Network." The interface looked like any professional child care services platform, only more sophisticated. I started by browsing job postings. There were listings for families in different states, with detailed descriptions and shockingly high salaries. One in particular caught my attention. A family in Vermont offering $800 a week for specialized care services, with a start date in 3 days. But as I kept scrolling through profiles, something started to feel wrong. The descriptions were too cold, too impersonal. The children didn't have names, only ages and gender, accompanied by meticulous physical descriptions that felt unnecessary for a nanny job. Some posts mentioned behavior modification programs and compliance training that made my stomach turn. I clicked into the training modules area. That's where confusion turned into terror. The course titles were things like managing resistance and disobedience, physical restraint techniques, maintaining subject cooperation during transition periods. The text referred to children as subjects and families as clients. The language was clinical, dehumanizing, unsettling. Intrigued and increasingly terrified, I opened the member directory. I saw dozens of profiles of women like me, single mothers, students, women in precarious financial situations. But their profiles included horrifyingly detailed information, photographs, addresses, and what looked like psychological evaluations. The most disturbing part came when I noticed a tab I hadn't seen before: performance evaluations. Their supposed clients could rate caregivers in chilling categories: obedience, level of discretion, and adaptability to special requests. My breathing quickened. I started exploring the site in a panic, and that's when I discovered a hidden forum inside the portal. The thread titles made my blood run cold. Transport protocols for reluctant subjects. Maintaining cover stories during encounters with police. Compensation rates for prolonged isolation assignments. I couldn't believe what I was reading. One thread talked about a caregiver who had tried to contact authorities about something suspicious, and the replies described how her access was revoked. Her security deposit was confiscated, and that additional measures were taken. In another thread, participants discussed transfer methods and processing centers located in different states, using euphemisms that barely disguise the horror. They talked about packages, deliveries, relocations, but it was all too clear. They weren't talking about children or childcare. The forum had profile photos that were obviously fake, generic smiling women pulled from stock image sites. But the worst thing was pinned at the top of the forum: a post titled "Orientation Reminder for New Members," listing the consequences of violating confidentiality. The penalties range from fines in the tens of thousands of dollars to more severe measures for anyone who put the network's security at risk. That phrase, "more severe measures," sent a shiver through me I couldn't stop. My morbid curiosity led me to click, by accident, on another section called Special Services Directory. The page took a while to load, and when it finally appeared, I knew I had made a mistake. It wasn't a job portal. It was a catalog. The categories included acquisition services, extended housing solutions, and relocation assistance. The prices were exorbitant, beyond all logic. Some listings included photographs that had clearly been taken without the consent of the people shown, along with requests for physical characteristics and age ranges. I started shaking. There were descriptions of selection processes and behavior evaluations, and discussions that mentioned the preparation of subjects before being transferred. It was obvious. This wasn't a nanny website. It was a human trafficking network hiding behind a carefully constructed facade. The pieces snapped into place with a hard jolt in my mind. The initial form questions about my finances weren't simple checks. They were measuring my vulnerability. The questions about my support network and my living situation weren't job requirements. They wanted to know if anyone would notice my disappearance. Even the behavior modification modules weren't about dealing with difficult kids. They were about training the recruited women. The realization left me frozen. I had handed over all my personal information, my address, my documents. I had given them an exact map of who I was, where I lived, and how alone I was. Suddenly, I imagined what would have happened if I had accepted that Vermont assignment in a remote location with no cell signal. I shuddered. I probably wouldn't be here telling this story. I slammed the laptop shut so hard I thought I'd cracked the screen. I sat in complete silence, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on the darkness of my living room. I didn't sleep that night. I checked the locks 1,000 times and jumped at every sound in the building. The next morning, I uninstalled the Tor browser, deleted the link, and tried to convince myself it had all been a nightmare. but I couldn't stop thinking about the other women whose profiles I had seen in the directory. Mothers, young women, students. How many had fallen into the trap? How many had accepted jobs that didn't exist? I never heard from Amanda again. No email, no call. It was as if my contact with that network had never happened. And that, in a way, was the most terrifying part of all. I reported the site to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, though I knew that by the time they investigated, it would probably already be gone. 3 years have passed since then. I still panic every time I see a job posting that looks too good to be true. I haven't joined any online job groups since. Sometimes I wonder if that network is still operating somewhere in a hidden corner of the internet, using the same methods to lure other desperate mothers, and whether my report did any good, or if it was just lost in some government file, forgotten forever. Story 6. Everything started on a quiet Thursday night while I was finishing grading some assignments. I'm an art teacher at a high school in a small town outside Lincoln, Nebraska. At that time, I lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house I had inherited from my grandmother. Nothing fancy, but cozy. Furniture bought from thrift stores and my own paintings hanging crookedly on the walls. I wasn't dating anyone. I didn't have the time or energy to download dating apps. Between classes, walks with my dog, Jasper, and video calls with my sister every weekend, my days were already full enough. So when I received a message on Instagram from a complete stranger, I assumed it was spam. I ignored it until another arrived, and another. They weren't generic messages or shallow compliments. They were personal, too personal. The first one simply said, "I keep thinking about that story you told me. You're wild." I thought he had the wrong person. The second was explicit, mentioning things I would never say in public, not even to someone close, and certainly not online. Then someone named Travis wrote, "Are you still into older men? I think it's great how open you are about your tastes." At that point, I opened his profile. He looked like a normal person, nothing suspicious. I replied asking who he thought I was. His response chilled me. "Seriously, we met on Warm Hearted. Remember? The app in dark mode. You told me everything. You even sent photos." I assured him I had no idea what he was talking about. At first, he didn't believe me. He thought I was playing with him or trying to be hard to get. That was the moment I realized something was very wrong. I spent the next few hours searching. I typed warm-hearted into Google, but nothing came up. It wasn't until I read a thread on Reddit about dating apps that didn't exist on the surface web that I saw that name mentioned. Someone said those platforms were hosted on the dark web. I had never had any reason to go into that side of the internet, and the idea terrified me. But I couldn't live with the uncertainty. That same night, I messaged a user from the forum, and they sent me a link that could only be accessed through the Tor browser, along with a warning. "Be careful. Some of these places are really twisted." Setting everything up took a while. I turned off the lights, lowered the screen brightness, and Jasper was asleep at my feet while I trembled with nerves. When I finally entered the site, I expected to see a fake account with a photo similar to mine, or maybe an AI-generated image. But no, it was my face, my name, my life. The profile used my full name, not a nickname. The profile picture was a cropped version of my college graduation photo, one that only existed in a private Facebook album, and the personal details matched perfectly. My hometown, my favorite band. Even an inside joke I had emailed my sister in 2015. It was as if someone had dissected my digital life piece by piece and reassembled it into a warped version of me. As I kept scrolling through that profile, the horror grew. It wasn't just my photos and personal information. There were also stories supposedly written by me. Explicit stories, each more grotesque and degrading than the last, paired with blurry images I recognized instantly. They were fragments of my own life. Vacation pictures, Halloween parties, one at the beach with friends, another on my couch in a tank top, all taken from innocent contexts, twisted to suggest something that had never existed. It was like someone had opened my life up and turned it into bait. I started opening conversations, one after another. They were full chats with different men, all written with a chilling realism. The phrasing, the timing, the details. Everything sounded human, authentic, as if I had really been talking to them. Some messages even included audio clips. In one of them, I heard a voice laughing, a soft, breathy, flirtatious laugh. It was my voice, or almost. I swear on everything I love that I never recorded anything like that. But the tone, the timbre, the breathing between phrases, it was so similar that I couldn't completely dismiss it. They had probably used AI to replicate it. And then I started noticing the pattern. Every few conversations, the fake me ended up asking for money or mentioning some financial hardship. Sometimes it was a story about medical bills. Other times, a heartbreak or an urgent move. Everything calculated to trigger empathy. It was obvious. Someone was using my identity to scam, manipulate, and exploit other people. They hadn't just stolen my face, they were using me as an emotional weapon. That night, I didn't sleep for a single minute. When dawn started tinting the curtains, I called my sister Morgan. She works in cybersecurity. I didn't know how to explain something so surreal without sounding delusional. I told her everything. The messages, the photos, the audio clips, the men who believed they knew me. She asked the usual questions, whether I had shared passwords, opened strange emails, or clicked suspicious links. No, none of that. I've always been careful. I sent her screenshots, links, and a description of everything I had seen. That afternoon, she called me back with a mix of outrage and resignation in her voice. It wasn't a breach, she told me. It was an accumulation. Someone had been collecting fragments of my digital life for years. Posts, comments, old photos, old usernames, forgotten forums, leaked emails. Everything compiled with precision, cleaned up, and assembled to create a perfect and perverse digital version of me. I tried to contact the supposed warm-hearted platform through an email address I found on a forum. The message bounced back. I tried another similar address. Nothing. The site had no customer service, no contact forms, no privacy policy, nothing but profiles, photos, and private messages. Morgan explained it was probably hosted on hidden servers, routed across multiple countries, nearly impossible to trace or shut down without a massive operation. I felt sick. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the feeling that I had completely lost control of my digital existence. Someone was living as me, speaking as me, using me. And the worst part was imagining those men, convinced they were talking to me. What if one of them decided to look for me? What if he showed up at my house? A week later, it almost happened. A week later, my worst fear almost came true. It was a quiet evening. The sun was already setting when I noticed a silver SUV parked in front of my house. It had dents in the body and out-of-state plates. The engine was off, but the man inside didn't move. At first, I thought he was a lost delivery driver or someone waiting for a friend. But 10 minutes passed and he was still there, looking at his phone, then lifting his gaze toward my porch, toward me. I watched from behind the curtains, my heart pounding. Jasper, my dog, was growling low, his fur bristling. The man never got out of the car. He never knocked on the door. He just watched me, checking something on his phone, as if he were waiting for a signal. I turned on the porch light and, with shaking hands, called Morgan. While I explained what was happening, the car started slowly and drove away down the street. I didn't manage to see the license plate number. I didn't sleep that night either. I turned on every light, locked every window, and jumped at the smallest noise. That was when I understood this wasn't just digital anymore. The invasion had crossed the screen. The monster someone had created with my face was now breathing in the real world. Morgan helped me take immediate measures. We tracked down my old accounts, deleted everything we could, and set up layered alerts and deeper search tools to detect new appearances of my name or photos. I also went to the police, though I wasn't expecting much. The officer who took my report didn't seem to fully understand what I was telling him. He wrote things down, said something about identity theft, and nodded slowly every time I mentioned the dark web, as if he didn't know whether to believe me or if I was speaking another language. I didn't blame him. Even to me, saying it out loud sounded unreal, but I needed a record, just in case something worse happened, in case someone came back. The hardest part wasn't the fear, it was the helplessness, the feeling that I had lost control over who I was. Every time I opened my laptop, I expected to find new messages, new people convinced they knew me. I started seeing myself differently in the mirror, not as a person, but as an image someone had used, a puppet wearing my face. I thought about how many men had looked at my photos, convinced they were talking to me, and I felt nauseated. I stopped posting on social media. I deleted my Instagram. I set my Facebook to private. I deleted old photographs. I even canceled an art exhibition where my portraits were going to be displayed. To reclaim my identity, I had to erase my presence, make myself invisible. It was like I had to disappear to feel safe. I felt violated, not physically, but in something much deeper. My digital existence. It was as if someone had been breathing down my neck for months, and only now had I noticed. 6 weeks later, the messages stopped. No more DMs, no more strangers writing. Why did you block me? No more unfamiliar cars in front of my house. Morgan believes the profile was deleted or replaced with another victim. Maybe the scammer got scared, or maybe they simply found a new face to use. I'll never know. I still have the screenshots and everything we recovered, saved on a hard drive inside a locked drawer. Not out of curiosity, but because I'm afraid I might need proof someday. It has been almost a year since then. I moved to another apartment, changed jobs, changed my phone, and I even started using my middle name professionally, just to create distance between me and that fake version of myself that may still be floating somewhere on the internet. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if any of those men still believe they spoke to the real me, if they think I was the one who deceived them, or if they were, like me, just pieces inside a twisted game that nobody controls. Because what they stole from me wasn't money or credit. It was something far more intimate. My identity turned into an instrument of manipulation and someone else's desire. And there is no firewall in the world that can protect you from that. Story 7. I'd been fired for the second time in less than a year. I worked as an information technology contractor in the San Francisco Bay Area. doing security tasks on servers and internal systems. Nothing glamorous, but enough to pay the bills. When the startup I was with collapsed, I was left with about 3 months of savings and no interviews in sight. I was staying temporarily in my cousin's apartment in San Bruno, sleeping on a futon that creaked with every movement, telling myself it was only temporary. My days consisted of checking job boards and sending applications to jobs that paid less than minimum wage if you counted the time invested. I signed up for every freelance platform imaginable, but it was like shouting into the void. Until I started poking around in places where, honestly, I shouldn't have gone. One night, a guy from the cybersecurity Discord server where I used to hang out dropped a vague message, almost like a dare. There's a job board with work that doesn't show up on LinkedIn. No links, no details, just that. And of course, curiosity did the rest. It took me several days of browsing strange forums and .onion links until I found it. The login screen looked like something out of a bank website from the 2000s. Clean, minimal, with a blinking login field and no logos. The job postings were just as strange. Cryptic titles like Validate Endpoints, Remote KYC Agent, or simply Confirm Access. One in particular caught my attention. Fast pay, low risk, no questions. The description was vague. It mentioned confirming an address and sending identity verification documents to unlock a frozen account. Pay, $1,000 in cryptocurrency, up front. I knew it sounded shady, but after a month of getting no responses to my resumes and watching my savings evaporate, I convinced myself it couldn't be that bad. Maybe someone was just trying to recover their own crypto account or get around a platform's verification protocols. Illegal. Yes. Dangerous. No. Right? I created a disposable email and filled out the form. It asked for a copy of my government ID, a selfie holding it, and a utility bill. I didn't think too hard about how stupid that was. I used an old internet bill with my name and address. They'll reject it, I told myself, or they'll just ignore me. But they didn't. In less than 24 hours, I received a confirmation email, and the money appeared in my crypto wallet. No follow-up, no messages, nothing. For a while, I forgot about it. I kept job hunting, picked up a few small remote maintenance gigs for a client in Ohio, and tried not to think about it. Until a letter arrived, a physical envelope with an official seal on the flap. I thought it was junk mail or a fine until I opened it. My name was on the first line of a legal document about a fraud case tied to a fake mortgage in Arizona. According to the file, my documents had been used to open an account in the name of a shell corporation that had laundered more than $200,000 in fraudulent transfers. The date, 2 weeks after I sent that form. My stomach tightened. I read the letter over and over, trying to find a mistake, but there wasn't one. My name, my old address, even the utility bill I had used. Everything matched. It was like being accused of a crime I not only hadn't committed, but didn't even understand. I called the number listed on the document. After several automated transfers, a woman with a firm but calm voice answered. She introduced herself as Case Officer Clarice from the Department of Financial Investigations. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it was clear she didn't completely believe my story. She asked very specific questions, as if she expected me to trip up. When I told her the truth, that I had sent my documents for an online job, there was a long silence. She didn't say, "You're in trouble," but I heard it anyway in her breathing. She asked me to come in 2 days later to a local office to give a formal statement. I went. I brought everything I had, screenshots, crypto wallet logs, the old laptop I had used to fill out the form. I handed it all over. Clarice, and I remember this perfectly. She had a wooden keychain with her name engraved on it. Asked me if I had ever had contact with someone named Wilmer Clay. I'd never heard that name. She didn't explain who he was, but by her expression I knew it mattered. After a couple of hours, they let me go. I wasn't officially charged, but I had to remain available in case they needed more information. That phrase, "in case we need more," stuck with me. It felt like an invisible rope tied around my neck. And then the weird part started. My inbox began filling with strange notifications. Failed login attempts from random countries, subscription confirmations I had never made, welcome emails from services I didn't recognize. One in particular froze me. A welcome email from a gym in Minneapolis, greeting me as a new member. My cousin said it was paranoia, that identity theft always leaves shockwaves that take time to settle. But this didn't feel like simple identity theft. It felt personal. One night, while reviewing my statements, I found an automatic charge for renting a storage unit in Kansas. My name, my address, my account. I had never set foot in Kansas. I called the company and pretended I wanted to verify my own information. The woman on the phone, unconcerned, said, "Oh yes, sir, you registered 2 weeks ago in person." I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't just someone using my data online. This was someone physically existing as me. I immediately called Officer Clarice to tell her. She only replied, "Let me pass the report to the lead investigator." And she hung up. That same night, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail was 9 seconds long. Nobody spoke. Just a low electric hum, like an engine running in a closed garage. I listened to it several times, and each replay caused a pain behind my eyes, as if the sound didn't want to be heard. I deleted it. I don't know why. I just knew I didn't want it on my phone. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address, no tracking number. Just my name handwritten in thick black marker. Inside was a USB drive and a folded sheet of paper that said, "You were useful." Nothing else. No threats. No instructions. I didn't plug it in. I drove straight to the police station and handed it over. The desk officer looked at me like I was overreacting, but he took it. I never found out what it contained. They never called to tell me, and honestly, I'd rather not know. After I handed over the USB drive, something in me changed. It wasn't relief. It was fear. A different kind of fear, quieter, like I had crossed a line you can't come back from. That same night, I wiped all my devices. I formatted drives, deleted backups, restarted my digital life from scratch. I bought a new phone, changed every password, and placed fraud alerts with all the credit bureaus. I even canceled my cards and opened new accounts. Still, I didn't sleep well. I woke up feeling like someone was standing on the other side of the door. Every creak in the floor or noise from the refrigerator made me jump. My cousin started noticing my state, but what disturbed him most was something he saw himself. One night, while I was trying to rest, he told me there was a car parked in front of the building with the engine off and the lights out. A man was inside, staring up at our window. He stayed there for almost a full hour. When my cousin went outside to confront him, the car was gone. No headlights, no engine sound. It simply wasn't there anymore. Not long after, I packed my things and left the state. I got a steady job maintaining databases in a small town where no one knew who I was or what had happened. There, for the first time in a long time, everything went quiet. No more strange charges. No more anonymous calls. No more packages with no return address. Still, every so often, something comes back. Emails with subject lines in Cyrillic or strings of characters that look like code. I never open them. I delete them immediately. Maybe it's just spam, or maybe it isn't. I have no intention of finding out. Sometimes I wonder what part of me is still floating out there, what fragments of my data, my documents, my face, are still stored on some forgotten server or in the hands of someone I won't name. I wish I could say I learned a valuable lesson, but the truth is simpler. I was desperate. I made a bad decision, and now a part of me is still out there, trapped on some hard drive, waiting. The noise stopped. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's over. It only means that, for now, they don't need me anymore.